Certified Scrum Master and Certified Product Owner are two elementary courses that Scrum Alliance offers. The content overlap is about 40%, I'd say 40%, because both of them are sort of Scrum 101 courses. So the Scrum stuff will be an overlap. Certified Scrum Master obviously is geared towards the role of Scrum Masters. Product Owner is obviously geared towards becoming a product owner or serving as a product owner. When I was a Scrum Master, I got both of them only because I wanted to see what the ball looks like from the other side of the court also. You don't have to, but I would say, this is the part, I guess, where I'm going to say, do as I say, but not as I did. So first year, 10 years of my career, I was a certification junkie. I got every certification that was out there. In hindsight, I'd say probably not the most optimal way of spending your time and money. So what I will recommend is you pick your trajectory or your career path and then figure out, which domain or which industry you preferably want to stay lined up in, and then go look in the learning and development space of which certification makes sense for you. So if you want to stay as a Scrum Master, then what I would recommend is investing in negotiation, understanding how to make better trade-offs, facilitation, public speaking, organizational design, systems thinking, problem domain analysis, which is mostly the Kinnaman model and developed by Dave Snowden. There are a couple other models also. There's something called the OODA loop, observe, oriented, decide, and act. And a couple other models out there. So I guess these kinds of things would be more beneficial to you for career development for Scrum Masters. Just like if you were to ask me for the product owner, I'd rattle off a bunch of things that a product owner or product manager would need to do. So you don't have to, but the broader you have knowledge base at the elementary level, the better it is, because you can build whatever foundation, whatever building you want on the foundation later on. The story writing workshop of some kind is basically to write stories, where a story, for those of you who are not familiar with the concept, it's a story or a piece of requirement written or told from the perspective of a user. Right? So there's a certain syntax to how people generally tend to write it. So there's an identification of who you're doing this for, which is your target persona or your target segmentation, if you will, your customer users. Then there's the what aspect of it, which is the actual requirement or the ask. Then there's the why, which is the benefit. So you write we would like access to this so that I can do that, right? So this is so that in between you write the requirement. So there's a certain syntax to it. The acceptance criteria is what makes that user story or that narrative valid and demonstrable. That means if you wanted to prove that you did this, how would you prove it? The way you prove that is by writing certain test cases around it. So any criteria that makes that user story valid and demonstrable, or testable rather, so you can demonstrate the working of it, is considered as an acceptance criteria. That's a textbook definition. Now, obviously, if you think about it, the person who would be most equipped and best positioned to write that user story would be the person who is closest to the stakeholders or to the person who is essentially funding all of this stuff, or the customer or the user. So your product owner on the Scrum team is the person who interfaces with all those people on a regular basis. Like the product owner essentially represents all those stakeholders. So the product owner is the one that should be doing the heavy lifting as far as writing up content. Right? So your product owner is the subject matter expert on the what and the why. Just like your engineers or your developers are a subject matter expert on the how and the how much, which is designing, solutioning, estimation, and things like that. Yes, you want the product owner to be doing the heavy lifting there. Now, can the end users get involved in that? Sure. Are they going to be available all the time? Probably not. And that's why if you think about your product owner, who is a part of your Scrum team, there are sort of three key attributes that make, if you're thinking about the anatomy of a great product owner. First is available, which means they're committed to the team. Second is knowledgeable. That means they're a subject matter expert on content, what and why. And third is authorized. That means they're like a mini CEO on that product. Not necessarily in the hierarchy of the company, but on the product, no matter how big or small the product is. So if you have a person who's available to the team constantly, who is knowledgeable about the product, and who's authorized to make decisions, that person is a great product owner. And that person would be the best position to write that story. They can also rely on some of the developers to help elaborate some of that intent. Like you might have business analysts on the team who essentially are part of the development team, but they're also forward facing, which means they're focusing more on the work that the product owner is doing. So product owner and the business analyst can work hand in hand and write that content out. You can certainly rely on your end users also. There's no rule against that. What I will say though, practically, based on my field experience, I will tell you end users, which I'm sure you've also seen, they tend not to be available on a regular basis. So relying on them to write specific things that you want to develop and how you want to go about it, it's probably not the best idea. You want to rely on your end users for subject matter expertise. Like every once in a while, maybe, loan officer working on the loan origination platform, and you as a product owner who is supposed to develop that loan origination platform, but you don't know how the loan number actually moves across those 6 screens. So every now and then you might go to, and say, can you walk me through this process? That's what the end user is supposed to do. They're supposed to provide subject matter experts from a usability standpoint. So how is this going to look like? What's experience going to look like? The product owner or the product manager is supposed to take all of that, distill it down to something that's workable by the team, work with the team to convert it to a language where they can understand it, and then help them deliver on all of that stuff. I'd say, so think of it like this. The writing of acceptance criteria or estimation, all of that stuff, right? The work that you need to do in order to get set up to do the work. There is a spectrum of responsibilities that has. The first responsible moment of doing all of that, like writing the acceptance criteria, estimating, is your product backlog refinement session, which should happen much before planning, right? The last responsible moment is the actual planning session, which means if you can preempt a lot of that conversation, which is pre-planning, if you can preempt that before planning, then when you get to planning, you have another opportunity to recalibrate that. If you wait till you get to planning, then you better be right in planning, because that's your last opportunity, right? So for those of you in the audience who has ever been to a sprint planning session that has gone on and on and on, those long and boring sprint planning sessions, they're usually a symptom of you not being ready and showing up to planning. So if you have a good, robust definition of ready that you are leveraging in your refinement sessions or your story writing workshops, then when you get to planning, it's just an exercise of pulling stuff down from the product backlog, putting it in the sprint backlog, and looking at everybody and say, are we good? Does everybody know what we're doing? If everybody is good, great. Division of labor should be clear. Then you're off to the races from there.